Shalom, everyone, and welcome to today's scripture with Ayaba G. And what can you learn from the book of Yovheliym or Jubilees, chapter 3? So I just want to thank you for joining me for this particular video. A couple of videos back, I did a scripture reading on chapter 3 of Yovheliym or Jubilees. If you would like to go back and check out that video to get that scripture reading, by all means, you're welcome to do so. Or if you just want to read, the third chapter of the book of Jubilees or Yovheliym, you can do that as well. That would be awesome too. So what I'm doing in this video is just kind of bringing out the things that I saw and learned and was reconfirmed to me as I was going through this book. You will see that there are familiar themes and information that coincide with the account of creation in the book of Bereshith or Genesis. For some of you, you may have read the book of Jubilees and you know all of this information, and if that's you and you're in that category, thank you for joining us anyway. You are awesome. If you are in the category that you have never read the book of Jubilees, this information is brand spanking new to you, you're awesome as well. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you learned something as well. And if you're like me, even though I had never read the book of Jubilees, I have read, the book of Genesis or Bereshith. And so I found that the information in some points was, lining up with the creation account. And in other areas, I found that there was more detailed information that was not given in the book of Genesis as it relates to the creation. So that's kind of where I fell in all of this. So some of the information that I am presenting or pulled out as I went through the verses was brand new to me. So I was, fascinated by it, and was really meditating on it and praying on it. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, just presenting the information that I learned and I found as I was going through the book of Jubilees chapter 3. So let's get started. Verse 1. This was the information that I found. These were brought to Adam on the 6 days of the second week. So right there in that first verse, it's talking about, what happened at a specific time. And you'll see that theme that throughout this chapter, that there are specific things that are being done at a specific time. And some of those times were not revealed in the book of Genesis. And so I'm in the midst of, learning about, time as the Most High Yah views time. So that's something that I'm researching and studying for myself as well. So the beasts were brought to Adam on the first day, the cattle on the second day, the birds on the third day, all that which moves on the earth on the fourth day, that which moves in the water on the fifth day. So all that information was found in verse 1. In verse 2, Adam named all of them. So whatever Adam named, the beasts, the cattle, the birds, everything that moved on the earth, everything that moved in the water, whatever Adam named them, that was their name. And I thought, as I was thinking about that and just meditating on that, I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. That is awesome. So let's continue. Adam saw that there was male and female according to every kind on the earth, but he was alone. Now that information was found in verse 3. So he's looking around at everything else, okay, and he was by himself, and everybody else had a companion. Everybody else had a buddy, but him, okay. Now in verse 4, this was the information that was found. Yahuwah said that it wasn't good for Adam to be alone. Yahuwah said, let us make a helpmeet for him. Okay, so he looked at the situation. He's like, everybody else has got a companion. It's not good for Adam to be alone, or Adam. Okay, we're going to make him a helpmeet. So in verse 5, this is the information that was found in this verse. Yahuwah caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. While Adam was asleep, he took out one of his ribs. So when I was reading this, I was like, wow, this was the first surgery. Okay? This was the first anesthetic. He, made him to fall into a deep sleep. And you can see the mercy of Yahuwah towards his creation. He didn't just say, come here, Adam or Adam, and let me rip out one of your ribs. Okay? He caused him to fall into a deep sleep, and then he took out one of his ribs. Okay? So you can even see the mercy and the love and the care that he had for his creation. So the first anesthetic and the first, surgery really took place. That's how I kind of viewed it. And so this rib was the origin of the woman. And Yahuwah built up the flesh in the rib's place and built the woman. Okay, so he didn't just leave him wide open. Okay, he put everything back in his place, just like the doctors go in and sew everything back up and stitch everything back up. But we know that when the Most High Yah does something, it's going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect. So he built the flesh back up in the ribs place and built the woman. Let's continue. In verse 6, this is the information that was found. On the 6th day, Yahuwah awakened Adam out of his deep sleep. So he brought him out of that natural anesthesia. Yahuwah brought her to Adam, and he knew her. Adam said to her, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Adam called her woman because she was taken from her man. Okay, so this is what Adam called her, woman. So in verse 7, this is what was found. The woman and the man and the woman, shall be one flesh. The man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his woman. So we see that even to this day, that when a man, if he's still living with his parents, gets married to his woman or his wife, that he usually leaves his parents' house and he usually goes and forms a new family unit, okay, and goes and lives with his wife or his woman. All right? So this is scriptural. This just didn't come out of thin air, okay? This is where that whole concept comes from. Okay, in verse 8, this is what was found. Adam was created in the first week. His woman was created in the second week, okay? So that was something that I had never heard before, that first week, second week, timeline detail. The commandment was given to keep in their defilement. This is verse 9 information. A male 7 days, a female twice 7 days. Adam was brought into the Garden of Eden on the 40th day to till and guard it. And his woman was brought in on the 80th day. Okay, that information was found in verse 10. All right, I didn't know that information. That was new to me. Okay, this commandment was written on the heavenly tablets. This is verses 11 and 12. If a woman gives birth to a male, she shall remain in her uncleanness 7 days, according to the first week of days, 33 days, and shall remain in the blood of her purifying. She can't touch any set apart thing. She can't enter into the sanctuary until the days of her purification, her purification, excuse me, are completed. Okay, so that was the commandment. If a woman gives birth to a female, she shall remain in her uncleanness 2 weeks of days, according to the first 2 weeks, 66 days in the blood of her purifying, 80 days in all. Okay? So this was the commandment concerning when a woman gives birth to a male child and when a woman gives birth to a female child. What she can and cannot do, and how long she's supposed to stay in her uncleanness until she is gone through the complete purification process and completed that time frame. So I thought that this was very interesting that they are talking about, that this is being presented and talked about from the very beginning. You know, that it's really showing the origin of these particular commandments. Okay, let's continue. The Garden of Eden is more set apart than all the earth. Every tree planted in it is set apart. Okay, that information is found in verse 13. So you know, everybody kind of thinks, when you think of the Garden of Eden, you think about it as being, you know, perfect and beautiful, beyond anything that we have ever experienced, you know, here on the earth, especially nowadays. Okay, so it is more set apart. It is more Kodesh, all right, than any other place on the earth. So in verse 15, this is the information that I found. The Torah and testimony was written down for Yasharel, so they should observe all the days. Okay, that information was found in verse 15. Okay, very, very important. This information was not just written down just so it can be, you know, known for information, just for the sake of knowing it. It's so that it can be followed, it can be obeyed, it can be done and carried out amongst the people of the Most High Yah. All right? In verse 16, Adam and his woman were in the Garden of Eden 7 years, guarding it and tilling it. Okay? 7 years. So there again, we have another specific time frame that is presented. Okay? In verse 16. Verse 17, Adam did not know he was naked. Okay? He protected the garden from the birds, beasts, and cattle. he gathered and ate the fruit in the garden and put some aside for him and his woman. Okay? So he had no idea that he was naked. He was, protecting the garden, from the animals, the birds, the cattle, and all of that. He gathered the fruit. He put some aside for him and his woman. He was taking care of the garden. He was taking care of his woman. All right? That's what was going on. Nothing else. Okay? A pretty simplified life. Okay. In verse 18, this is the information. After exactly 7 years, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, the woman was approached by the serpent. The serpent asked the woman, "Did Elohim command you not to eat of every tree of the garden?" Okay, so once again, we've got another presentation of time. When something happened specifically, after exactly 7 years, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, it tells you when the woman was approached by the serpent. And then, of course, the dialogue starts. And the serpent, asks the question. All right? Verse 19. The woman responded to the serpent that Elohim has said to us that we can eat of all the fruit of the trees in the garden, but the fruit of the tree in the midst of the garden you shall not eat thereof, nor shall we touch it, lest we die. Okay, so she already knew what Elohim said. She's telling the serpent, okay, that this is what Elohim told us. This is the instructions. This is what we were commanded that we could do and what we could not do. Okay? And a lot of times when people, talk about this particular account, we talk about what they couldn't eat, but I also looked at what they had that was available to them. Okay? They had every other thing that they could eat in there. They just couldn't touch that tree that was in the middle. Okay? So in verse 20, this is the information. The serpent responded to the woman, "You will not surely die. Elohim knows that the day you eat thereof, your eyes will be open, you will be as Elohim, and you will know good and evil." So this is what the serpent told, the woman. All right, so he's basically telling her, you're not going to die. Elohim knows that when you eat that fruit, your eyes are going to be open and you're going to be like him, and you will know good and evil. Okay? Basically telling her, that you're not going to die. You're going to be like him. Planting that seed in her mind, in her heart. So what does the woman do? Let's go on to verse 21, see what information we find from that. The woman saw the tree. Okay? So already she's listening to the serpent, and she saw the tree. She's looking at it. It was pleasant to her eyes. The fruit on the tree was good for food, and the woman took the fruit and ate it. Okay? So up until that point, now remember it said that they were in that garden 7 years. 7 years. Okay, that's a good little bit of time. But they hadn't touched that tree in the middle of the garden until when? When the serpent came and put her focus on it, put her focus on it. And then she began looking at it and focusing on it and, you know, really honing in on how that fruit looked. And she gave in. And she ate it. And in verse 22, this is the information that we find out. The woman covered her shame with fig leaves. Okay? She covered her shame. She figured her eyes were open. She found out that she was naked. That's what she was covering up. She gave the fruit to Adam. He ate it. His eyes were open. Then he saw that he was naked as well. Okay? They didn't know they were naked up until that point. They were in the garden. They were eating of all of the fruit that was in the food that was in the other part of the garden. You know, Adam or Adam was, you know, tilling the garden and protecting the garden, and then boom, in one act of disobedience, after they ate that fruit, they figured out and their eyes were open that they were naked. And the first thing they did was covered themselves with fig leaves. So that was verse 22. In verse 23, it says, to cover his shame, Adam took fig leaves, sewed them together, and made an apron for himself. Okay? So he sewed the fig leaves together and made an apron. Because now they're in a totally different status. They're in a totally different situation than they were before they ate the fruit. Their eyes were opened. Okay? So now in verse 24, this is the information that was found. The serpent was cursed by Elohim and was angry with the serpent forever. Forever. Okay? The next verse was verse 25. This was the information that was found. Elohim was also angry with the woman because she listened to the voice of the serpent and ate the fruit. The following is the punishment for her disobedience. I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your pains. In sorrow you shall bring forth children. Your return shall be unto your man, and he will rule over you. This is what we as women experience to this day. Okay? We experience this to this day. So this has been a perpetual punishment for this act of disobedience. Okay? In verse 26, this is the information that was found. Because Adam listened to the voice of his woman and ate from the tree that he was commanded not to eat from, the following is the punishment for his disobedience. Cursed be the ground for your sake. Thorns and thistles shall it bring to you. You shall eat your bread in the sweat of your face till you return to the earth, from the earth where you were taken, for earth you are, and unto earth you will return. Okay? So that's the information that was presented in verse 26. That was what the disobedience, that was the punishment. Okay? Verse 27. Elohim made coats out of skin for Adam and his woman and clothed them. He sent them out of the Garden of Eden. Okay? So remember, they had, taken fig leaves and covered themselves with them. But Elohim clothed them with coats made out of skin. And so he just didn't send them out of the Garden of Eden in their shame, naked. He clothed them. Okay? So he was, of course, he knew their status had changed. And he didn't just leave them out there. He knew that they were going to be dealing with things differently than they were inside of the Garden of Eden. So he didn't leave them out there totally exposed in their nakedness. He clothed them. And in that, I even saw the mercy, once again, that even though they had sinned and they were disobedient and they were being put out, there was a consequence to their disobedience. He was still showing mercy by not, sending them out of the Garden of Eden just totally exposed and naked. Because they were no longer going to be in that, protection of that garden. They were going to be on the outside of it. And it was going to be a different situation that they were going to be living in. So in verse 28, on the same day that Adam was sent out of the Garden of Eden, he offered a sweet savor offering that consisted of frankincense, galbanum, stacte, and spices. It was offered in the morning with the rising of the sun, the day that he covered his shame. And when I read that, I was like, wow, right here in the very beginning, he was offering up an offering. Right away, an offering was given up. I got, like I said, a sweet savor offering. He had sinned. It's like you got to go before, Elohim, and you got to offer up something. You messed up. Asking for forgiveness, right from the very beginning. And I thought that that was very, very interesting, very, very telling of, what was going on from the very beginning. What was going on. Even before, Moshe or Moses. Even before, all the other times that we've learned about, the different types of offerings that were being offered up before the Most High Yah. And right here, one is revealed from the very beginning. So that was something that I had never, knew about. And this was something that really stood out to me. So, verse 29, the day that Adam and his woman were sent out of the Garden of Eden, the mouths of all beasts, cattle, birds, and whatever walked and moved, they could no longer speak. They were speaking the same language with one another. Wow. So that not only were Adam or Adam and his woman speaking with one another, talking, but the animals were speaking and talking the same language with one another. Okay? And once that act of disobedience happened, from first the woman and then Adam, and they were being put out of the Garden of Eden, they saw their shame, their eyes were open, then also the status and the ability that the animals had, they no longer had. They could not speak. Their mouths were closed shut. So their ability to speak was taken away. So what, the two first human beings did affected the animals. and everything else that was in the Garden of Eden as well. And I thought that was very, very interesting, how all of those things were taking place all on that same day, the same day of their disobedience, and that they had to cover their shame. All of this from one act of disobedience. So in verse 30, all flesh that was in the Garden of Eden was sent out and scattered according to their kinds and types to the places that had been created for them. Okay, so now they were also put out of the Garden of Eden too. They were sent out to their different places because all of these beasts and animals and all of these things that moved across the earth, they can't all stay in the same, territory. They got to have certain types of, food that they eat, and they've got to be in a certain environments and conditions. So now they were sent out of the garden, and they were, put in the places where they would be able to live and, dwell and survive. So in verse 31, this is the information that was found. Adam was the only one that was given the awareness and sense to cover his shame of all the beasts and cattle. So none of the cattle was, getting anything, feeling like they had to cover their shame. I thought that was very interesting. Only Adam and his woman had that sense or awareness that they needed to cover themselves. Okay? Only them. So that means that the animals, however they were created, whatever fur or hair or, skin that they had on them, that's how they went out. That's how they were sent out of the garden and into their new environments that they would be living in. Only the two human beings were actually covering themselves. They were in a totally different state. So I found that very, very interesting, and that's something I'm going to continue to pray about and, meditate on and, seek the Most High on and what He wants to, continue to teach me in that particular area, because I thought that was very interesting as well. Okay, in verse 35, this is what was found. Excuse me, verse 32. And jump ahead. Because of this, it is written on the heavenly tablets that all those who know the judgment of the Torah should cover their shame. They should not uncover themselves like the other nations uncover themselves. Wow. So you see how all of this is tying into the commandments. Okay? You can't walk around naked. You can't walk around, wearing your clothing in a certain type of way that, uncovers your shame. Where you're showing private parts of your body. And that is something that has become, a big time issue in this day and time. It has been an issue for a very long time. Okay? And it's saying here that they should not uncover themselves like the other nation uncovers themselves. So this goes all the way back to the beginning. All the way back to the beginning. On the first day of the 4th month, Adam and his woman left the Garden of Eden. They lived in the land of Elda, in the land of their creation. That's verse 33. Okay? So once again, you got a specific day and month. Okay? And then also information that was revealed. They lived in the land of Elda, in the land of their creation. Verse 34, Adam gave his woman the name Kuwa, which means life giver. Okay? So up until that point, he gave her a title, woman, and then in this particular verse, he gave her a name, Kuwa, which means life giver. All right. So she moved from title to name. Um, then in verse 35 it says, they did not have a son until the first Jubilee. After that, Adam knew his woman, Chua. Adam tilled the ground as he was instructed when he was in the Garden of Eden. Okay, so they didn't have a son until after the first Jubilee. Okay, more time references here. And then after that, he knew his woman, Chua, life giver. All right, so you see how that is in correlation with one another. He really gave her a name that became her function. And Adam tilled the ground as he was instructed when he was in the Garden of Eden. So he continued on with his first job, taking care of the land where they were now living. Okay, so these were some of the things that, really stood out to me. Some of these things that I did not know. I'm learning some of these things for the first time myself. Some of the things I did know, and I just found it really interesting how many of the commandments, are tied back to the very beginning, all the way at the time of creation. So I know that I'm going to be going back and praying and meditating and seeking the Most High Yah for more revelation and what He wants to show me and teach me from this, passage of Scripture in Yovheliym-Jubilees, chapter 3. So I pray and encourage that you will do the same, and take some time to pray about this passage of Scripture, read over it again, and just allow the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit of the Most High Yah, to continue to teach you what He wants you to know and understand and obey from this passage of Scripture. So I just want to thank you for joining me for just this, in-depth look at Jubilees chapter 3. And with that, I will leave you with Shalom.